Previously on agentpalmer.com, celebrating Sydney and the arts with Anthemic Play It Safe. Lots of love and laughter in Gracie Allen's biography by George Burns, and John's tagline is still processing in my head, you have to grow older, but you don't have to grow up. This is the Palmer Files, episode 112, featuring Essa Hansen, back for the third time, who's returning on the other side of the publication of her Graven Trilogy. We discuss taking a break, process, reception and promotion, what has been learned, burnout, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 112th episode is Essa Hansen, who's still working at Skywalker Sound, but returns to the show not just as a published author, but as the author of a published trilogy, the Graven Trilogy. For information on my guest's day job, listen to episode 21, and for more information on the origins of the Graven Trilogy and the first book, Nophek, listen to episode 32. But here and now, we're talking about the other side of that trilogy. We discuss how it feels to have completed the trilogy, burnout from that completion, and a demanding day job, fan interaction, promotion and marketing, the creative process, and just what will the recovery process be, and when. All of that, plus a whole lot more, is coming your way shortly. But first, remember, if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all contact information for myself and Essa Hansen, my guest, in the show notes. There, you can find more information about my guest's work at EssaHansen.com. That's EssaHansen.com. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, Nia, you have finished a trilogy of books.
Yes.
And you did that all while maintaining, to some extent, many full-time job projects.
Yes.
Have you given yourself a break?
I am coming up upon a break now.
The book's been, the third book's been published. You didn't go like, I'm done. Here comes the beach.
I'm trying. So the book finished for me at the beginning of this year, 2023.
Okay.
And it came out in July. So there's a gap where like most of my part is finished in production and it's not out yet. So I'm waiting, for that last sort of final moment.
Push. Okay.
Yeah. But I still had my day job and that was really busy and getting into the busiest period. So the book came out, but it wasn't like I could go off on vacation. So now my film project has finished as well. And I'm taking at least a few months off to try and decompress. But that's going to be a slow process.
Well, so this was going to be my big question for you, because I'm not going to say we're the same, because I just am incapable of break, like a true break. That's something that personally I just cannot do. I will have to jot down. So I'll have to write. I might be able to not record for a few months, but I don't know if you'll get me to a point where I won't think I should write this down. Like I should write this, or so just something. So like if you have 3 months upcoming, or months, in general upcoming, like Are you, is it a genuine do nothing? Like, is it a genuine, like, I'm just going to read all the books, I'm going to catch up on all the media that has come out? Or is it going to be like, yeah, I mean, maybe, but I also have this other thing I'm going to work on?
Yeah. So before the trilogy, I was more like you, where like I couldn't put the brakes on my creative brain if I wanted to, like even out on vacation, like there's always ideas going and stories going.
Yeah.
I can never be bored because there's always something to learn or something to look up or something to chase. And the one surprising thing about, well, the burnout of this, getting the trilogy done with a demanding day job, was that kind of went away.
Ah, okay.
And that was something that I never thought, like, some of the passion's still there and it's still something I want to do, but like my entire creative being is so wrung out that it just doesn't happen. Like I can't close the space between what I want to do and the energy that I want back and where I am now.
Well, I mean, you give me hope that one day I'll be able to, because mine has been, and I think part of it is I've never had a large overarching project. I have ongoing small projects. I'm not saying the podcast and the blog are nothing, but they are a lot. It's a lot of micro projects. So like, I finished the draft, I finished the episode, moving on to the next. And so like for me, 1 week without doing anything, with the asterisk that like, if I'm healthy, because if I'm sick and like laid up, then there's very little we can do anyway. But like when I genuinely choose to take time off, I last about 3 days. 3 days is my max when I'm healthy. And so you give me hope that one day I can change.
I do think there is a happy middle. I am not there yet. But yeah, like before I was on contract and on deadline, I could flow with one creative project for a longer term if it felt like it, or I could switch to another one, or like I could write 2 books at the same time, which I did for a while, or I could kind of bop around and there was nothing looming, no kind of pressure. But with the trilogy, it really was like 3 solid years of just this one world, day in, day out. In between my day job hours, it was just this one thing was all I had extra time for. And that was, like, from a creative standpoint, kind of new and unexpected for me, like not having the time luxury to jump around and just being like in one mode for that long. And I think that's part of what burned me out faster, was like the intensity of just this one mode, this one like corral of thoughts for so long.
So now that it's over, and this is a selfish question, and I genuinely mean that. To me, from the sidelines, you published a trilogy. So victory, right? Victory. But like, how do you determine success from your own, brain? Like, because doing it is one part, but there's always more metrics. And like, what are you, is it positive reviews? Is it, bonus? Like publishing has changed so much too. So it's not like it used to be. So like what determines success for you?
That's extremely individual, I'll say up front. Like, so every single author is going to define success differently. And the experiences that I've heard of and that I've had vary wildly. And you really have to define success for yourself, because there's so many different metrics, and you'll hit some, you'll lose some, and you just have to keep an eye on what for you means success and what fulfills you. So, for me, I was trying to create a specific feeling for readers and writing toward a specific kind of reader. And when some of the reviews started coming in, especially at the end of the trilogy, and from readers who have stuck through books from book 1 to 2 to 3, and were kind of picking up everything that I was putting down, and I could tell that they got it and that I was giving something to them that was my intention in writing it. That for me felt like success.
Okay.
More than any kind of metric, like that what I was conveying was getting through to another human being in the way that I wanted.
No, I like that, because I feel like, especially for a trilogy, especially the way you did it, in that each book got progressively, not necessarily longer, but more complex. Which, by the way, not for nothing, is the way research is. Like, that's just generally how things work. Like, you go like, oh, I don't know, I want to learn a little bit more about pottery. And then you go, okay, so now I need to know a little bit more about all the different clays. And then I need to know the different temperatures at which all of the clays harden. And like, there is like, and just the further you go down, the more complex it gets, which is, I mean, life. I mean, that's just, that's kind of the way it works.
That's exactly how it works.
But to know that people hung on, because like there has to be a dropout rate, like and I feel like this is just all media. Like at a certain point, like there's people that aren't going to watch the second movie. There's people that aren't going to read the second book. And then of those people, there's going to be people that don't do the other. So like, of course there's a limit.
And there's at one point I knew the specific, there's like an average kind of ratio of drop off in a series.
Okay.
And I don't remember those numbers now, but there is like a figure. And I sort of also know the reasons why readers would bounce off of book 2 or book 3 and like not continue on.
Okay.
But it was definitely more uplifting than I expected in like just elbows deep in writing and meeting deadlines and getting this thing made, to see that readers were, carrying through and responding to and enjoying like the scope as it expands in that way. Yeah,
without spoilers, I can selfishly say, I haven't been able to really talk about your book yet, the third book, because my partner hasn't read it yet. And so I'm waiting for that, because I got to talk a lot about this. I get to relive it with her, just like I got to relive the second book because she got it after me. And so like I get to relive it at that point. But very much the intervening months is very much like when you watch a movie that you don't want to spoil and you're like, did anybody see it yet? Come on, somebody's got to see this movie so I can talk about it. And so like I'm kind of like I'm in a very privileged position to be like, well, I'll be able to talk about it. Spoiler all I want. But I don't know. I've turned into a spoiler-free guy. It's just,
well, and I imagine it's different with like media that's smaller and less consumed. It's like harder to find those, even like on social media or that, it's like harder to find those people to kind of gush about something or discuss something versus like, the big franchises that everyone's talking about at the time. Most of which I've missed because I have been so busy. So I see it happening and I'm like, I can't engage in any of that.
Well,
and then 5 years later I watch it and I got to keep it to myself.
I mean, you don't have to. Some of us, look, I will admit.
I can still yell on social media.
Some of us are just as far behind as you are.
That's true.
And like nobody can keep up on all of it, right? But I can't not ask this question. And if you can't answer, that's fine. But have there been different mediums talks?
Different medium talks? Possibly.
Okay. Well, because that was it. I listened back for a little bit because I was like, I think I talked about this during this when we talked about the first book, and I was like, I have to ask again.
Well, now I can't remember what my answer was.
I just said I think you just said it would be interesting, but all I know is that my 2 cents to you was that it would work better as a limited series than a movie.
Yes, I agree that as a movie it would be tricky to condense, like the first book.
Or you're just all of a sudden in weird, this is part 2, like part 1 and part 2.
Yeah, it would be difficult. And in my head, since I work on these kind of feature films, I sort of had this sense of like it would be prohibitive just budget wise, because I worked on a lot of like non-franchise sci-fi blockbuster films, and most of them have flopped, and it's just not like the audience isn't there to pay off the gigantic budget of these VFX intensive films. But now my view has shifted a little bit, and I can start to see ways to reframe the narrative or, shift it so that it is a budget achievable, or like in a limited series, you could kind of, there's ways to skew the perspective and the structure and the shape of it so that you're not leaning too heavy on the visual effects.
So is that a goal? Like, even if it's not your trilogy, like I know you've been in sound for a very long time now, and now you've created this body. Do you want to produce? Like, because I know, there's always that, well, everybody in Hollywood has their script, right? And everybody, but I don't think everybody wants to produce. I don't think everybody wants to act. I think people go after their things, but like, you've kind of dabbled in like a lot of different things, especially in this massive creative vortex you've been in. Is there a part of you that's like, producing seems fun, or like is there a part of you where you look at like other pieces of the industry and go like, that could be fun?
I think they're all like, it could be fun and it could be scary, and it's sort of equal measure, because as a consumer, like, you see a lot of like novels that have been adapted and it's terrible, it lets you down, or like you see all these mixed cases and some of them are good and you really can't know. And as someone in the entertainment industry, I know the vast number of people involved in getting something to the screen in any format. And so as a creator, you're giving up, there's this balance, you're giving up creative control to people who are experts in whatever that one department is, whatever that one field is. So, you're trusting them to do even better than you could imagine if you were trying to control every aspect of, how this thing gets made.
Yeah.
So you're trusting all these many, many people to bring their creative genius in ways that are better than you could imagine. And so it's hard, some creators, I think, want to get in the control-y, like, this would be great if I could make sure that everything was exactly the way that I wanted and exactly the way it is in my head, exactly the way I envisioned it. But I think you absolutely have to give over that control to potential that you can't even imagine.
Well, but so it begs two comments, really. One, you've already jumped off this massive cliff by starting the trilogy. You finished it, but like, starting it was not like, there are never any guarantees of the creative process. And two, during that process, 3 times no less, you've given over to editors and proofreaders and advanced copy whatever's, like, you've kind of I guess you've learned to cede a little control away from yourself. So how scary can all those other things really be? Like, you just went through this. Like, you jumped off the cliff and then you gave the control to other people. And like,
yeah, I think there's this myth in publishing, especially among newer authors, that like, if you go the traditional publishing route, like, you're going to get assigned an editor. They're going to, like, their say is, final, and they're going to do whatever they want with your book, and everyone's going to kind of shape it into what they want. But I had a ton of control editorially, and it was always this discussion. If I didn't like a suggestion, I could, discuss my case and where I was coming from and what I wanted. And in the end, like, all those edits were sort of what I wanted. I could reject them. I could go with them. I could solve something in a different way than was suggested. So in one avenue, I had a lot of control. And then in other avenues, there's absolutely zero control, like the cover, the marketing, the packaging, the way the book's presented. So it was sort of, and I imagine, like, I don't know, but I imagine that in a media situation, it would be the same, where maybe some people really want your involvement and are listening to you and, get what you're saying or get the book. And then others maybe have their own ideas or haven't done their research, and you get a bit of a mix. You have to prepare your heart for that.
Yeah, it's just hard for me to imagine you would be scared having put this on. Like, you get to wake up every morning with 3 books on your shelf. Like, you've already gone to war. You're a veteran now, right? Like, because it's, even had you gone the independent route, like, you're here now. Like, you're on the other side. Like, it feels like you should wake up, especially after your months off, which I hope you actually take and don't ruin by getting a good idea in the middle of. But like, I hope you wake up and go like, oh, I have another idea. And now you're like, I can do this. Like, there's no, I guess.
I'm getting there. I hope I'm getting there. Well, ask me after these months off.
Okay.
Because I feel like my brain is still coming back from war. Like, I'm waiting for it to come back from war. And I've had the next book idea. And I had to revise it a bunch and, make pitch documents and stuff this year. And now I'm at the point where I've got to draft it. But I'm still like waiting for that same energy to come back and that same, passion for the page to come back. And I realize how much, like, the last year, a year and a half, my energy was just sheer, like, fugue state. Have to get it done. Just complete immersion in this world and my deadlines.
Now,
and the reader, like,
does the reader feedback kind of?
Yeah, that was something that I hadn't expected with a series and a trilogy, especially because there's an end state, right?
Yeah.
That there's, like, again, it's sort of this dual state. There's this joy in seeing the reader's reaction and they're excited for it and it's, like, hitting for them. But then that just creates more pressure to, like, the next book has to be even better for them, or the final one has to land the ending. Otherwise, you've let them down and they've spent this time with you and they put this energy in. So it was this extra pressure that was like, I love them, but also I have to, the ball's in my court. I have to deliver on this or I'll let them down.
Now, I'm saying this for anybody listening. I'm saying this, like, you have the ability to ignore all the outside influences, but, like, do you have an internal pressure to try and do, like, another one? Like, is that, or is it just all external and you can be like, I need my months. Like, I need some time. I need a break. Or, like, is there some internal drive where you're like, I got to keep going?
You mean for each book in the trilogy?
No, I mean now that that's over.
Now?
Yeah, like for whatever's next.
Yeah, there's no external pressure really. It does feel like there's a career pressure. So there's, like, certain momentum, that my books are out there. People kind of know who I am. The readers are eager for something else. Like, my core readers are looking forward to what's next. But publishing is really slow. And so it feels like if I don't kind of draft something soon enough and get it on submission, which is also slow, and then maybe it gets picked up, maybe not, and then it'll be a year or two before it actually hits shelves. It's like a long runway, and it feels like at this stage, if I don't start soon, then that momentum's just gonna go somewhere. And then once the momentum's gone, I think there's pretty much no pressure because it'll be a restart. It'll feel like a restart in all respects. So in some ways, I'm almost waiting for me to be slow enough to lose that momentum. We'll see.
So this is the real question. What have you learned? Like, I mean, first of all, from the outside, and, like, you and I message every few months. Like, it's not, we don't talk every day, but, like, there's a part of me that goes, I really hope that the next time it's not book, and there's not an overlap, and that there's some time in between, or maybe there's a book and then it's sat on a shelf where the second one can be put together. So that way, when the first one publishes, the second one's already done. And then it's not like, because I think I messaged you like 2 or 3 times during the overlap of books 2 and 3 in various stages. And it just felt like, even from our short interactions, like the world was falling apart. Just because, like, you were juggling so, like, and I'm not just talking, like, even if you had quit your day job for this, it just felt like managing 2 novels at once, even though they're in the same unit. Like, it just felt like a lot. Like, would you sign a contract that said, like, I need like, no, not that again? Like, is there a, what have you learned?
Yeah, I've learned so much. So yes, there's a lot that going into publishing the first book, like I didn't have the peer group to get the information that I needed, and there wasn't as many like podcasts and other resources that really informed me about what I was in for. So it was a lot of learning as I went.
Okay.
And the book schedules overlap. So the minute you turn something in for one, you're on to the next, and it just never stops ever until the trilogy's done. And at the time, I didn't realize that the extent to which I could ask for more time at various stages of editorial and production. So now I know, like, I could ask for another month or 2, and like a lot of people do, and that's the normal for them, but it wasn't for me. And since in the film industry, I'm used to schedules being efficient and absolute and non-negotiable.
Okay.
I kind of brought that mindset into publishing, where I was like, yeah, the entire team is on a schedule that makes sense and is almost non-negotiable when everyone's going to do their part. And, it's going to flow the same way, which it doesn't always. And they expect you to kind of negotiate for your specific needs. So yeah, in the book 2, I was sort of juggling book 1 stuff and book 3 stuff while trying to draft book 2. And I felt really bad responding to everyone who asked for interviews and things like that I just had no capacity at all. But my next project will be a standalone novel. So just one, not a series world. And I hear that a lot of authors burn out on series and trilogies, like right out of the gate.
Okay.
And after that, they'll go with standalones for a while, or maybe duology, and kind of pare it back because it's more intense than they thought.
Now I know it's always different for everyone, but in the peer group that you've kind of created throughout this process, do people usually start with a trilogy? Like I mean. Going from trilogy to standalone makes sense because, like, a trilogy is a lot of work. But is the norm just a standalone?
So when I got my book deal, it felt like trilogies or longer series was sort of the norm. Like every imprint seemed like they were acquiring longer series.
Okay.
And now, as I've been watching peers go on submission and get book deals, it feels like they're pulling back a little bit to like duologies or standalones and kind of holding the cards a little bit more. But definitely when I was on submission with my agent with these books, it was, the trend was to write a standalone with series potential.
Oh, okay.
Is the term, which means that you write one book and, it has the potential to be a series of any size, but it kind of stands on its own. Like Nophek Glass still kind of feels that way to me, the first book, because that's how I wrote it. And once it sold, I kind of went back and added threads that were going to go into book 2 because I knew it would be a series. But as a whole, like, the arcs all kind of wrap up in one little package because, you don't want to spend extra time planning or writing subsequent books in a series that's not going to sell. Because if you have to shelve the first book, you're shelving all the books, and that's wasted time.
Yeah.
So you kind of go on submission with your standalone with series potential, and you start working on the next thing, whether that's another standalone with series potential or standalone or whatever you're excited about. You start working on that, and you kind of ignore the thing on submission, and maybe it sells, maybe it doesn't. But The thing I didn't expect is if you do sell the standalone and it becomes a series and you get a series deal, which is amazing, then you suddenly have to rush and figure out what else you're doing. What are the other books? And, you know, if you're a slow writer or it's like a big world and it takes you time to wrap your head around that, you can kind of feel like you're just rushing to get up to speed with it as you're, you know, as your own deadline, as you're demanded to create it.
Did you have a room in your house dedicated to Post-it notes? Like with the string and the crazy conspiracy theories to keep track of everything? Like how did, we're not spoiling anything, but like it does get a little bit complex. So I need to know, like, cause as a reader, I was like, I slowed down in places because I was like, I got to make sure I get this. But you're the one creating this. How did you, like, is there, like, and I know, like, because we talked about it in that first episode when we talked about sound design, where you had, like, you know, you're working on Avengers and you have, like, millions of sounds that are, you know, was there a part of your brain that, like, because you were handling in a different way, like, all these different sound things, that you were able to handle all these different plot threads? Like, is there a connection there?
Like, I do think I'm able to contain a lot in my head, just like abstracted without needing to write it down.
Okay.
But as a writer, I quickly outpace like any physical ability to get ideas down because it's just too slow. It's too slow for me. So I use digital like text edit. I use Scrivener. I use anywhere that's like fast, and I can delete things if they're done, and I can, you know, organize things the way that works for my brain with fonts and colors and, you know, broken out however works for me. So yeah, it was especially my outline documents for books 2 and 3, especially 3, just like, I feel like if I looked back at them with enough space, like in a few months, like my physical visual shorthand for things would just make no sense to me, like colors and symbols and little like abbreviations and things, just to try to condense what was going on into a shape that I could see in one, like on one page, or like
I just assume it's just kind of like your own personal like high school yearbook, where you open it up and you go like, somebody wrote like 3 words that don't mean anything, and you're like, that must have meant something.
Yeah, and I can still remember like how kind of frenetic some of this like structural editing stuff was, and some of the ideas that I wanted to pull off, but wasn't really sure how, like, not spoiling anything, but structure wise, in the last third of the final book, there's some stuff that was like just the trade-off of points of view and like information flow and all of that, and like time-space shenanigans was really, and like the metaphysical mechanics and how all of that worked was really tricky to like, this needs to make sense, at least to be on some level. And trying to get that structure working was a lot of, just in Scrivener visual shorthand stuff.
So, like, are you getting to unwind now little by little? Like, is there a weight lifted now that you, quote unquote, only have a day job? You know, like,
it's coming in pieces. Like, I think we want to believe that, you know, you finish something immense and just immediately the weight is gone and you feel like $1,000,000 and you're fine. You're like, high energy, ready for the next thing. Like, you're done and you're excited and it's awesome.
I mean, I will admit you do need some recovery time, but like there should be a weight lifted, I would hope.
Well, and in publishing, it's weird because you are so, like, emotionally, you're so far back, about 6 months from where the public is. So, like, say I've turned in everything, like the book is finished in my mind, and I've turned in everything 6 months before it's going to hit shelves, and anyone's going to react to that.
Yep.
And, like, with an emotion that matches mine, like, the relief, the excitement, like I'm done, I finished this thing. And then by the time 6 months or whenever reaches, and then the fans are excited, you get photos, it's on the shelves, whatever the hubbub is, you've emotionally kind of moved on from that visceral excitement feeling. And so you're still excited, but it's like there's this displacement.
Okay.
That every time a book is released has been really weird to navigate. And maybe not all authors get this. Maybe they get another surge of the same kind of feelings, but this displacement between like where your work is done and where the work is received is a big time gap.
Now, as an independent creator of text blogs and an audio podcast and whatever it's going to be in the future, I know for a fact I do not promote as much as I should. Okay. And I say that knowing that like we have mutual friends that probably do more than me, that probably still don't do it as much as they should. You have a publishing house behind you and a marketing team that's pushing you along the way. So I want to ask you, did it feel like you pushed it enough? Did it feel like you pushed it too far? Because that's a thing where like coming from an independent, like, I know it's not enough, but like it's enough for me, or like it's what I can do versus you've got, professionals to help along the way.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned along the way that I didn't really grasp entirely when I got my book deal was that like the novel's performance is pretty much decided when it's acquired. Like they decide the fate of your book that early. In the early discussions before it's acquired, they know the marketing spend, they know like where they're going to place your book, they know how much they're going to push it. So the fate of your book and your series is determined like before you even kind of hit that runway.
Okay.
That it feels as the author. And the other thing that I didn't understand was that first year I felt like my effort had any kind of impact on sales or visibility. So I said yes to everything. Every virtual event, every podcast, every blog interview, everything, because I felt like I needed to try to give my book the best chance that it could and get it in as many hands as I could.
Yeah.
So I was expending all of my effort just trying to do everything, even if it was uncomfortable for me, even if I knew I wasn't great at it. I was trying to do everything. And I burned out to a crisp really fast. And then I realized that none of it really matters. Like it doesn't move the needle very much. And you should do it if you love it and have fun, talking about those things and meeting people and
That's what happens after the third book for you. Now you can just chill out and talk to people and you don't have another book or two to write.
Yeah. Well, so after that, around the first book release, I said yes to everything and burned out. And then I just, for my own health, I had to start saying no to any of those kinds of quests. And then I was just so intensely engrossed in finishing book 2 and 3 to a degree that I felt like my fans would be happy with my effort and that I had nothing that I could regret in what I put into them under the duress that I was in. And, I was just completely focused on that. And then that's done. And I thought I should see if doing events again is comfortable for me or not. And if that was a factor of burnout or if it's just like me being sort of an anxious, inarticulate person.
Well, how did events change for you, by the way? Because when you put out the first book, people maybe read part of it, maybe read all of it, but they're just getting to know you. When you do the second, and when you're doing promotion for the second and the third book in this trilogy, people know you now. Like even if they don't know you, they know your writing, they know your style. They've gotten you've given them 3 pieces of you, right? So like, was the fan interaction like that much different from like first book to like I've got a trilogy now?
Well, so, and I wonder if that would have changed, my perception of that would have changed if I had been keeping up the same level of like public fan interaction, because with a debut novel, no one really knows you. Like maybe some people at say a virtual event have read the book. Most probably haven't, but they're interested. So you get sort of this, people are interested, but no one knows the questions to ask because they haven't read it. No one's really engaging with the content. You just kind of feel like you're shilling yourself a little bit. And then with book 2 and 3, like the publisher support drops off almost completely, and they're sort of are banking on the first book carrying the rest of them.
Okay.
And at that point, I was too burnt out to like really push them myself. But I realized I had a little core of fans that were, spreading word of mouth and telling people. And those bloggers and interviewers and readers became really precious to me. And that, a lot of them were friends with each other, and they were kind of all talking to one another and excited about what was coming next. And that uplifted me through a lot of the dark times, just knowing that there were readers there that, were excited and were getting other people reading the first book and the second and excited for the third. And that momentum meant a lot.
So I know we talked a little bit about maybe changing mediums, but for now, you have a day job. You're going to take some time off. You're a published author times 3. Like, is there a part of you, despite everything else, that wants to be like, I think I just want to be a writer now? Like, is that you've done it. Like, I mean, which puts you ahead of a lot of people that say, like, that just sit back and go, I want to be a writer one day. But like, is that a thing where you could see yourself just churning out one book every few years? Like, is that a thing you want to do? Or like, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I could. I definitely realized and this is something I probably should have known ahead of time, like many things, but I didn't realize the exact workload in like terms of hours of the day that a lot of the editorial and drafting would take me. But doing a 50-hour day job and squeezing in writing, which is about the same amount of effort for me, into each week was not sustainable. So I had to take some time off my day job just so that I wouldn't die trying to finish the third book. And now I'm like, well, how do I balance these two things? Because writing is really dear to my heart, and I would, sort of want to do that until the end of time, creating worlds and stories and characters. And my day job is really fun, but really intense also. So I need that spaced out a little more. But schedules in the film industry can move around in post-production, especially. We're sort of subject to the moving of production schedules and the release date and all of that. So things aren't really set in stone. So I can't exactly schedule publishing time around that. And if I get a book deal, that it's flexible to some degree, but there's also a production schedule and rhythm that can't move.
Yeah. Okay.
Without moving the release date a bunch, and that just shuffles everybody around. So I'm sort of subject to these various rhythms falling where they may and happy to deal with it. But I think I have more tools now.
Okay. Well, you're probably better prepared now as well.
Yes.
At least a little bit better prepared.
Yeah, and I know to ask for the time that I need and to be, sort of upfront about, and just hopefully having honest conversations about what's needed when and how much flexibility there is and how we can all meet each other's needs and rhythms.
Is there a change in your, I guess I want to say, creative process that you could see in the future that would allow for a little bit more balance? Because just on what you said in the last 15 minutes, it feels like even though you took time off your day job, there was no balance in your life when you were finishing book 3. So, like, is there a way that you, as a human, can find a way to balance a little bit as you move forward in whatever capacity the combinations end up?
Well, if they double up, there just isn't a lot of wiggle room.
Okay.
Like, I would wake up as early as I could, like 6 or 7 in the morning, and I get a couple hours before I start work at 9, and then I'm off work at 8. So then it's from 8 until I pass out at midnight or 1 was my schedule. And then I would get a few hours of sleep and have to wake up and do it again. So that was my schedule for many months, just trying to do both. But what I realized amidst that was that, and I kind of had a sense of this before, but that I was able to maintain that sort of rigor proves that in my brain, because my day job is very creative and very technical. So I'm doing a lot of creative work, a lot of creative sound choices and sort of painting with sound and thinking about storytelling and environment and movement and shape and all these things that I also cover in my writing because it's very immersive and sensory. But the two mediums are different gears in my brain.
Okay.
So I think if they had been the same, I wouldn't be able to keep up like 17 hours of work every day for months. But because it was at least a little bit of a gear shift in terms of how I express those same modes of thinking, that helped me, switch gears after 10 hours of one creative mode into a different creative mode and still get something done.
I mean, I think it's very much a testament to your internal creative character that those two things, while similar and from like where I sit, the same, world building with sound and world building in text from this seat seemed like it's not like you're going to a drudgery like data entry job and you're coming home and you're writing prose. Like to me, I'm like, seems like an overlap, but like it's a testament to your internal creative character that you can say that they're fulfilling in different ways. So you can do still, as a fan, don't want you to work 17 hours on the next one. Maybe cut it back to 15.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, and like still sci-fi fantasy at my day job. So it feels like I like pick up my little briefcase and I exit one world and enter another world, and I'm there for a long time, and then I pick it up and I exit and I enter another world.
Well, I'm happy to know that around the time that this finally releases to the world, you'll be, I don't know, getting ready to what's the break? You gonna go sip drinks on a beach?
I'm just trying to be gentle with myself right now. I'm getting back out in nature a lot, which really fulfills me, like going to the beach, taking hikes, walking around, just absorbing. And that's where I get my ideas too.
Okay.
So getting out in nature more, just taking it easy. And I feel like it's going to be a slow process, but I'm sort of retraining my brain that everything is actually okay. Like, you can get out of fight or flight. Like, you're not going to get attacked by something today. Like, it's okay. And that doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time. But I'm slowly trying to ease back into not a routine, but just a sense that things can flow. Like, there's no urgency. Because I've spent so long with this urgency just constantly, whether it's day job work or things on the calendar or events or deadlines, or like you always have 50 clocks going in your head and your brain's always kind of looking forward to the next thing. So I'm trying to unhook from that and just foster a sense of ease for a while until I can recreate the routine, like the writing routines I want and the creativity I want at the right times, and sort of get back to the normal that I remember from before the books.
Given the conversation you have just heard and many of the others that have been contained within the episodes of this podcast, I am led to the conclusion that Essa and my own lack and yearning for balance is not only common for many, but perhaps comes with the territory of being in a creative space. As I'm speaking to you now, I hope that Essa is taking her break, or at least is soon to do so. Even though we spoke about what would happen when that break happens, I'm still not sure there won't be progress made towards that next thing. I just hope that rest is also happening. I need to do the same myself, which is why I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Be kind to the creators whose work you enjoy, especially independent creators or those who are not doing it full time. Balance doesn't come easy to the creative mind, neither does rest for that matter, but as John Hammond once said, creation is an act of sheer will, and like Hammond's creation in Jurassic Park, that will is usually spared no expense. The break creators seek is often from their own mind, to have it turned off for a bit. It's not nearly as easy as you might think, so just be kind. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files episode 112. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact my guest, Essa Hansen, and myself in the show notes. There you can find more information about my guest's work at essahansen.com. That's ESSAHANSEN.com. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heiter. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right. Do you have one final question for me?
Since we have talked multiple times across the years, what is your experience talking to someone with these intervals, interviewing them sometimes about the same topics and about new topics? Like, what is that for you as a podcaster? Like, getting these check-ins, these snapshots, these deep dives across the years.
I think part of it's cheating because I do message you in between. So it's not like I'm not coming at this stuff with, well, since the last time she was on, I read both books. Like it's been a little bit more than that. But like I'm within my own circle. This is my function. Okay, like I'm the one who calls X, Y, and Z friends that no one else talks to because they don't call anybody. But I call enough that they pick up for me, right? So I get to know, I get to check in. And then when I talk to everybody else, I'm like, oh, by the way, so-and-so's, doing great, So that it's a role I fill in my non-creative space. And I just like talking to people. Like you and I could do this for a week and probably have a different conversation. Even if I started with the same question every time, I think you and I could have a different conversation each time. And I think in a day and age where my podcast is not nearly what it could be for two reasons. One, probably not short enough. And two, I don't want it to be short enough. Like, I want to raise the level of attention span in the world. And so there's a part of that. I think that the interesting thing about doing this so infrequently and not being like, well, You can come back next year. Like you can back annually. Like annually we can do this. I think it's a testament to how life does and doesn't change in the span of those things. So like between the first and the second one that we had was about a year. And we talked about your day job in the first one. And in the second one, you had just put out the first book. And during the first one, we talked a little bit about you writing the first book. And it was just that little snapshot. Now we get to talk about, it's 3 years now, I think, almost to the day that we're recording. And it's you've done 2 more books, but you've continued this day job, and you've, just kind of, we've talked about all the things you've learned through the processes. But these are things that if I don't get out of you, and I mean this a little bit selfishly, if I don't get them out of you and learn them through your experience by talking to you and share them with my audience by having you tell me, then there's going to be potential authors out there that are going to be like, well, it is possible to work 17 hours in a day job in a book, but no one's suggesting you do that. And it's important for somebody to say that. It's important, is it wrong? No, I'm not going to say that. The books were wonderful. It clearly worked out on some level, but you also need months now to recuperate. So there's a give and take in that, but that needs to be stated. Because there are quiet people in the back that maybe read your bio and go, okay, full-time job, wrote a trilogy. Anybody can do that. That seems like logical. And without conversations like this in any capacity, at any stage along the way, no one's going to tell that person, hey, maybe take some time. Like maybe pump the brakes.
Maybe it's hard, yeah.
And this is a theme, and this is the reason I love doing this, is because I get to talk to different people in different places that are creating very different things. And the theme that comes up a little bit more often than it should is it's never as easy as it looks. Like there's a generation or generations of people out there that think all I do is hit record, talk to you, hit process, and hit publish, which is not the way this works at all. And they're the same people that think you sit down, type your 300 pages, send it to a publisher, and it goes publish and goes out there. And people need to know that you and I are doing this in our spare time, that I take time to, I read your books, but I also take time to do a little research. And, we do have a bit of a relationship outside of this, but then this gets edited and you have a day job and, there are other things. People, it's always glossed over. Everybody's like, hey, I did this thing. And nobody's out there yelling from the rafters, which is what I feel like I'm doing, going like, hey, kid, this is something you can do, but maybe learn that it's not easy.
Yeah, and there's a degree to which, especially on social media, you can yell about the successes. You can yell about the exciting things. You can yell about everything positive going on with your life, your career, your process. But you can't always publicly, you don't want to be complaining all the time. You don't want to be down. You don't want to be negative. You don't want to, there's things you can't talk about that you're unhappy about. That's for the group chat offline.
But I'm glad that I'm glad we have group chats, because that's the other side of the coin is you have to let that out. You have to let that out, and you have to be, I think there's a degree to which it's really valuable to be honest for other people. Like me back in
2019, 2020, there are so many things that I would have loved to have known ahead of time, to have been aware of, to have been warned of, like the peer groups we talked about that I didn't have, the resources, the conversations. Those things would have prepared me a lot better, and I maybe could have managed my time better, at least like psychologically, emotionally, been able to parse and navigate some of these things better.
But now you're talking about them on this. I'm sure you've talked about them elsewhere. Hopefully people are listening, like not that people are listening, but hopefully they're taking it to heart. Like hopefully somebody who wants to write a book or start working on a movie,
Yeah, I take what I went through, and I'm the white knight, the paladin. Like anyone newer who wants some knowledge, I will point them the right way or tell them, or like I'm here for those people who were me in the past when I felt like I needed that and didn't have it. But now I know. Yeah,
I mean, since we last talked, I helped produce a movie.
That's awesome.
And I did it from the hours of 9 p.m. because I worked with someone. From 9 to 11 nightly, it felt like, or sometimes till midnight or 1 if we were on a roll. And it's a project it's one of those projects that had we known what we were getting into beforehand, we probably never would have which is, look, there is an amount to where you just have to jump. But there is a thing where I'm like, maybe people shouldn't do like a third gig, so to speak, as a full-length feature documentary remotely. Like, it worked out for me and Chris, but I don't know if that's the thing everybody should do. But I like the idea that you're out there, and that I can give you a platform to kind of help future people who want to create things.
Yeah, and multi-creatives that are looking to, and people that are too creative. Like we were saying at the beginning, it's like too many ideas. Like you can't stop the creative brain. Like you always have something pushing at you that's exciting that wants you to follow it. You have all these threads, and following them is amazing. But at some point, if all of them start to materialize too frequently, you have to pick your battles, and
you got to go for a walk. You got to get outside. You got to
take a walk. No, that's when I get all the ideas coming. Take a walk, drive my car, take a shower. Anytime that it's harder to write things down is when the ideas come to me.
You're not wrong, but I do try and actively shut it off when that happens.
That's why I listen to podcasts or music or something that can preoccupy that bit, especially podcasts or like audiobooks, nonfiction, where that can preoccupy that part of my brain that wants to chase after little story rabbits, idea rabbits. It helps.